Hello friends, this is Ratnam, Associate Professor of Chemistry from Government Degree College, Bodhan. Today's my topic is in continuation for the last session, because in the previous session we are discussing coordination chemistry, coordination compounds. We had up to now covered in the last session what is coordination complex, what is central metal ion, what are ligands, what are different types of ligands, and how to name complex ions, coordination compounds, IUPAC nomenclature, the rules for that, and uh, till now we have covered all the major parts. We have also covered the theories. Werner theory is covered in the last session. That according to Werner, how a complex coordination complex is represented. So he has developed the theory of primary valency, secondary valency, two different valencies, according to which he mentioned that the primary valency is ionizable, whereas secondary valency is non-ionizable. Primary valency represents oxidation state of the metal ion, whereas secondary valency represents coordination bonds attached to metal ion. So he has given the diagram with the dotted line representing primary valency, thick lines representing secondary valency. So whatever there in the ionic sphere that is non-ionizable, that will not dissociate when it is in the solution form. All that is covered in Werner's theory. He has developed the theory based on um, conductivity, conductivity of the solutions. He prepared solutions of cobalt, ammonium chloride, all that different combinations he prepared, and he cross-checked the conductivity, which he mentioned that based on the results, he was thinking that how chloride can be what within the sphere of the coordination complex and outside the sphere of the coordination complex. After that, Sedgwick has developed the theory. Uh, Here, the Sedgwick concept is based on the electrons. So the concept of electrons has been introduced by Sedgwick. So according to Sedgwick, ligand is electron donor, and two electrons are donated by ligand to metal ion. So metal ion is the accepting electron pair. So that was the major concept of Sedgwick, and he showed the diagram with arrow mark from ligand to metal. Arrow mark is given so that it covers the electron donation from ligand to metal ion. After that, he also mentioned that once metal ion takes electrons, so many electrons from ligands, then how it will be stable. So he mentioned a specific terminology called effective atomic number, EAN rule. So EAN rule tells that effective atomic number is the total number of electrons on the central metal ion after complex formation. That means when complex is formed, that is when ligands are donating electrons to the central metal ion, then the total number of electrons on the central metal ion becomes equal to the next inert gas number. That is, for example, if 3D series we take, then that number should become equal to the next inert gas, that is krypton 36. So once the effective atomic number becomes equal to 36, that indicates that the complex is more stable because of its inert gas configuration. So once the orbitals are completely filled with electrons, then it becomes more stable. So that was the idea behind EAN rule. So Sedgwick has forwarded that theory, and he explained that those complexes which follow EAN rule, that means effective atomic number becomes equal to next noble gas configuration, then they are more stable. But there are so many ligands which do not follow EN. That means whose effective atomic number is not equal to next noble gas configuration, but still they are stable. So why they are stable, that was not explained by Sajjad. So after that, now we are entering into different theories after the to explain the bonding in coordination compounds, and we will be discussing only one of this. Actually, there are theories like valence bond theory. After that, crystal field theory. After that, ligand field theory. After that, molecular orbital theory. So there have been development in the theories, but of all these, most important are only these two, one and two. That is valence bond theory, which explained almost most of the properties of the complexes, but few problems are there with regarding to valence bond theory. Then crystal field theory has come into evolution, which also explained the remaining properties. But still, there are few things which we need ligand, LFT ligand field theory or MOT, molecular orbital theory for very rare cases. But most of the properties are explained by 1 and 2, that is VBT and CFT. Now, in our syllabus, we have valence band theory as a part of this lesson. So we will go through that today's session. But what is this valence bond theory exactly? So what you need to understand is valence bond theory. It was the Pauling who developed this concept. This mostly explains the structure, whatever the structure and the shape geometry of the complex, and it explains uh, magnetic property, and also it explains uh, what is the basic nature of the complex. And of course, there are certain features which we generally cover uh, from using valence bond theory. It could explain so many things. Of course, we also take the help of what calculating experimentally the properties like magnetic moment. We can calculate magnetic moment by using experimental data, and we can compare that data with the theoretical data. So there are several things which we come across by comparing these two things. Let us try to understand what is valence bond theory first of all. Valence bond theory tells that how a bond is formed. According to valence bond theory, a bond is formed by overlapping the orbitals of each atom. Generally, we know bond formation is between two atoms. So each atom is having one orbital. These orbitals of both the atoms combine, that is overlap to each other. That overlapping may be a face-to-face overlapping, direct overlapping, which is called sigma bond, and it may be partial overlapping, that is sideway overlapping, that is called pi bond, that we know already. So bonding is due to the formation, overlapping of orbitals. That is the main concept of a valence bond theory. So here, overlapping of orbitals is the main point, and that is how a bond is represented. Let us take how this overlapping takes place. Here, the overlapping is between what? Between metal ion and ligand. That we know the bond is between metal ion and ligand. That is what we are talking all about. Metal ligand bond, that is what we are talking, and that is exactly what the coordination bond. And how a coordination bonding is formed? Already we know that coordination bonding is formed only when ligand is only sharing electrons, but not the metal. Therefore, we need to understand very clearly that ligand should have electron pair. That is, the orbital of the ligand must contain two electrons. And metal, for metal, since metal does not share any electrons, therefore metal orbital must be empty, isn't it? Central metal ion must have a vacant orbital. According to the what the complex, we need to check the number of vacant orbitals. So sometimes we need only two vacant orbitals. If we need only two ligands, it may be three, it may be four, it may be five, it may be six. So depending on the requirement for the complex formation, we need to take vacant orbitals on central metal ion. So very clearly we have to understand that central metal ion has vacant orbital and ligand has filled electron filled orbital. So we need to have overlapping between these two. So vacant orbital of central metal ion and filled orbital of ligand. So that is how the bonding is expected. Now see vacant orbitals on the central metal ion, there is some problem because we can't, sometimes we have mostly octahedral complexes. For example, octahedral complexes means their coordination number is 6. That means 6 bonds are required there. So 6 orbitals which are vacant on central metal ion cannot be same because there are different like s orbital, p orbital, d orbital and f orbital, whatever it is. So this number of vacant orbitals are not equal on the central metal ion. So for that, the concept of hybridization has been developed. So how exactly bond is formed? First of all, the required number, that is whatever the ligands bond formation is required. So that number of coordination bonds, whatever that, so that number of atomic orbitals first hybridized to give vacant hybrid orbitals. So on central metal ion hybridization takes place, and in that hybridization, s orbital, p orbital, d orbitals involve. And due to this involvement of empty or vacant atomic orbitals, hybridization takes place, and after that, vacant hybrid orbitals are formed on the central metal ion. Central metal ion is now having vacant hybrid orbital, isn't it? So these vacant hybrid orbitals now are ready for overlapping or for bond formation with the ligand, isn't it? So these are called vacant hybrid orbitals. Now here we use the word hybrid orbital because after hybridization, whatever the number, for example, if we need 6, then 6 orbitals undergo hybridization to give 6 hybrid orbitals. So these 6 hybrid orbitals are equal in energy and also they have definite geometry or shape. So that is the main idea behind hybridization. We know already that hybridization is the important concept to understand the shape of the molecule, because otherwise you can't explain why the shape is like that. So hybridization gives a specific shape to the molecule because the hybrid orbitals have specific shape. So due to that specific shape, hybrid orbitals also are equal in energy. Therefore, bond formation is same, and they are directed in the specific direction according to their geometry. Now, here we need to understand what are the orbitals which are involving hybridization. S orbital. In because in complexes we already know. Let us take 3D complexes for example, where central metal ion belongs to 3D series. In 3D series, what happens? We have the general configuration like n minus 1 d electrons, ns2 electron. In general, all 3D has from scandium to zinc. If you take from scandium to zinc, then everywhere we find the electrons filling in the d orbital, and there are compulsory 2 electrons on the s orbital. So naturally, we need to check that hybridization is possible only from s orbital and 4p orbital, 4s, 4p, and 3d. So these are the 3 major orbitals which are involved in hybridization. And in this connection, there are certain cases where 3D orbitals may be available sometimes, may not be available sometimes. So if 3D orbitals are not available, empty orbitals are not available, then we need to go to 4D orbitals. Okay. For example, if you need 6 empty orbitals, 6 vacant orbitals, s orbital is only 1, p orbital is only 3. But when you come to 3 plus 1, 4. But for remaining 2 orbitals, either it should be from 3D or it should be from 4D. So based on the 3D or 4D, we need to understand some terminology which are very very important to know. And 3D, if involvement is there, then we need to mention that it is D2 sp3 hybridization. If 4D orbitals are involving, we need to tell it as the uh, sp3 D2 hybridization. So this is a simple understanding that what type of orbitals are involving in the hybridization. And one more point we need to understand here: uh, nature of the ligand is some important point here. So anyhow, let us try to understand the salient features of the valence band theory here. That vacant orbitals always undergo hybridization, and it gives same number of hybrid orbitals. And each ligand has at least one orbital containing electron pair. So that is necessary. Vacant hybrid orbitals and filled orbitals of the ligand, they undergo overlapping, and that overlapping of this filled orbital and vacant orbital between metal and ligand gives coordination bonding according to valence bond theory. So this is the main feature of valency bond theory. You see this. For example, let us try to understand this what I am just now talking all about. So cobalt is there. Okay. In this cobalt, let us try to understand this. Cobalt is plus 6, 7, 8. 27 is the total this number. And in that, if it is plus 2 hybridization, uh, actually cobalt is in plus 3 hybridization, plus 3 oxidation state, and plus 3 is the loss of 3 electrons. So the oxidation number always tells how many electrons are lost. Based on the number of electrons lost, for example, here you can see this is how you see this. This is sp3 hybridization, for example, vacant orbitals, and 3D is not vacant, so we can also go to 4D sometimes, depending on the complex. Let us try to understand what are different hybridizations, what are different shapes, and with some examples. So before we start this, we just try to look at the shapes first. You see this linear shape that comes from sp hybridization. Sp. See, this is the sp hybridization. This is central metal ion. Sp hybridization gives involvement of one s orbital, one p orbital. After hybridization, this is the hybrid orbitals. The shape here it is hybrid orbitals. So on the left side, one sp hybrid orbital, on the right side another sp hybrid orbital. So these are two hybrid orbitals. So what we have to understand, two atomic orbitals undergo hybridization. S orbital shape is round spherical, p orbital is dumbbell, but after hybridization it gives a dumbbell mixed with sphere. So this is how we get two hybrid orbitals which are equal in energy and shape. The shape is also specific. So one orbital is on the left side, another orbital is on the right side. This is not p orbital. The name of this orbital is sp hybrid orbital. So this is the main point what we need to understand. Sp hybrid orbital. We should not call this as s orbital or p orbital. We have to call this as sp hybrid orbital, isn't it? Now, what is the shape here? The shape is linear. Linear means same line. Both orbitals are on the same line but opposite to each other. Because always the theory tells that orbitals want to be, as much as possible, they want to be separate. Okay, they want to maintain the distance, the maximum possible distance. Here the maximum possible distance is 180 degrees. Isn't it? The angle between two orbitals is 180. And if it comes like towards this, then it becomes near to again to this orbital. That's why it is the maximum possible distance, and the maximum angle possible is 180. Now the shape is called linear. Now what happens? One ligand comes and bond formation is here. A coordination bond is formed on this side. Another ligand comes and a bond is formed on this side. So this is one bond, coordination bond, and this is another. So ligand, first ligand on this side, second ligand on this side, isn't it? So this is how the structure is formed. Similarly, sp2 hybridization. Here sp2 hybridization, how many orbitals are involving? Three. One is s orbital, two p orbitals. P2 is indication of two p orbitals. It is not the square, p square. It's not p square. It is p2. We have to pronounce this as p2. sp2. That means one s orbital, two p orbitals. Now what happens? Three orbitals after involvement. Already we know S is the spherical shape, P is the dumbbell shape. But here look at the hybrid orbitals. These three are hybrid orbitals. See, shape is same. Each orbital is having same shape, half dumbbell like, isn't it? And they are distributed into in a such a direction, in such a shape that the angle between them is almost all same. That means it is maximum possible angle is 120. Here it is 120, and on every side it is 120. So this is called trigonal planar or planar triangle. So that is on the same plane. All three orbitals are on the same plane, but one is in this direction, another is in this direction, another is in this direction. So a ligand comes and bond forms here. Another ligand is bonding from here, another ligand bond formation from here. So three ligands on three sides. This is what we call as trigonal planar structure or planar triangle structure. Now look at sp3 hybridization. Here still one more orbital is increasing because one s orbital, three p orbitals, sp3, one s orbital, three p orbitals. Then what happens? Total we expect four hybrid orbitals, and four hybrid orbitals are forming here. But the point is that they have same shape. See again, hybrid orbitals are same in shape, and they distribute themselves or they arrange themselves with maximum possible distance, and that is 109 degrees some roughly minutes there. So this approximate distance maintains all the orbitals away from each other, possibly away from each other, and this particular shape is called tetrahedral shape. sp3 hybridization gives tetrahedral shape. You see, the ligand, one ligand is upside, it is not planar. All ligands are in different planes. It is like this, two ligands, if you take any two ligands on one plane, that means if you connect two ligands on a plane, then the remaining, for example, you see this, the shape is, if you take these two on the same plane, then remaining these two are on the plane which is perpendicular to this plane. That means you take two perpendicular planes like this, for example, like this. Then if two ligands are on this plane, then remaining two ligands are on this plane. So this is how we generally consider this tetrahedral structure. You can see sp3d. sp3d means one s orbital, three p orbitals, one d orbital. That means total five. So here five number. That means five coordination bonds are forming. So what does it mean? sp3d. That means here five orbitals are to be formed. They undergo hybridization to give five hybrid orbitals. Now what is the shape? You look at the shape. Here three orbitals on the middle. These three, one, two, three. These three are on the middle and they are on the same plane. They are planar. That means they are on the same plane. And the upside one orbital, downside one other orbital. These two are above the plane, below the plane. So altogether this particular shape is called trigonal bipyramidal. Trigonal bipyramidal. Trigonal means three are on the same plane. That is trigonal, same plane. Bipyramidal. That means two are on the perpendicular direction. That is only possible above the plane, below the plane. So two perpendicular orbitals are above and below the planes. So this is what we call as uh, trigonal bipyramidal shape with hybridization sp3d. So 5 ligands come, one from this side, another from this side, and one from this side, another, and last one from this side. So 3 and 4, 5. Now look at the structure with coordination number 6. Now this coordination number 6 hybridization is 6. We need one s orbital, 3 p orbitals, and 2 d orbitals. sp3d2. sp3d2. So what does it mean? So almost all 6 orbitals are involving in hybridization. Therefore, it gives 6 hybrid orbitals. Now look at this. This is the shape of 6 hybrid orbitals. All are how they are distributed. So again, this is a highly symmetric structure because 4 are on the same plane, perpendicular to each other. 4 same plane means just like cross, 90 degrees to each other. Each is maintained 90 degrees, and 2 are above and below the plane. That means wherever you check, any two orbitals are maintained 90 degrees. So the angle is 90 degrees everywhere. You can check any two orbitals, the angle between two orbitals is 90 degrees. In trigonal bipyramidal, 90 degrees is one angle, another angle is 120. In the same plane, we have 120 degrees distance, whereas up and down 90 degrees. Here, in octahedral shape, here on the same plane also 90 degrees, and above the plane, below the plane also 90 degrees. Because on the same plane, we have 4 orbitals, and above one orbital, fifth one is above, and sixth one is below. So altogether, the shape is like that. You can even check the shape on the left side, how the complex after formation with 6 ligands, the complex look like. So these are the different shapes with the different hybridizations. So why hybridization is so important? You can easily understand here that it gives same number of orbitals, but they are called hybrid orbitals, and each hybrid orbital is similar in shape and in energy. They all hybrid orbitals look like same, and the energy of the hybrid orbital is same, and their arrangement, their distribution is in a specific geometry, and that geometry is called what we call as shape. Here sp hybridization gives linear shape, sp2 trigonal planar, sp3 tetrahedral shape, sp3d trigonal bipyramidal, sp3d2 gives octahedral shape. Let us take this different coordination numbers and how we generally look at the shapes and how do we expect different complexes with some examples. Here you see the coordination number 2. First one is coordination number 2. When the coordination number 2 is taken, the hybridization is called sp hybridization. We know that, and the shape is linear shape. Good examples are this copper chloride, that is dichloro cuprate, and also dicyano argentate. So already we know the nomenclature method, that how to name the complex. Sometimes I'm using IUPAC name, sometimes I use a normal names, but IUPAC name nomenclature is necessary to know. We should understand that also. We discussed in the last session. So these are the good examples. Here two ligands are chlorides and center metal is copper. Here cyanides, two cyanides are two ligands. Silver, that is argentate, is the center metal ion, and two cyanides are distributed on both sides. sp2, that is hybridization sp2. Coordination number is 3. So trigonal planar, that is mercury iodide. This complex is 3 iodides are distributed on 3 sides. And for coordination number 4, we have 2 hybridizations possible. In the last session we discussed only sp3, but there is another hybridization which is called possible dsp2. sp3 means 1s orbital, 3p orbitals, and already we know the structure is tetrahedral. The good examples are nickel carbonyl and nickel chloride, where here nickel carbonyl is zero oxidation state, nickel is in zero oxidation state. In nickel chloride, the nickel is in +2 oxidation state. So, okay, we will check how that kind of what sp3 hybridization is possible. We'll check based on the the detailed study of complexes after this. But there is another type of hybridization which is called dsp2. That means if one d orbital is vacant, that is from 3D. 3D orbital is vacant, then that vacant orbital also come into hybridization. So that only one vacant d orbital, another vacant s orbital, and only two p orbitals. Because third p orbital is not necessary. Already we have d orbital present. Therefore, that gives dsp2. So dsp2 is the what we call as hybridization, which gives square planar structure. DSP2 is the involvement of the orbitals, d orbital, s orbital, and p orbitals. Then that gives square planar structure where pz is not involving. D orbital is there, dx square y square is involving, s orbital heliospherical, and p2 indicates px py, and the total overall shape is square planar. And good examples are nickel cyanide and ammonical what complex of platinum. So these are good examples we know. And with regard to hybridization 5, this already we know. DSP3. So here one is d orbital, another is s orbital, and three p orbitals. DSP3 is a clear indication trigonal bipyramidal. Already we know pentacarbonyl iron. Pentacarbonyl iron with iron in zero oxidation number, zero oxidation state. And anyhow, we will look at this structure. Now, when coming to the coordination number 6, again we have two different types of orbitals uh, involving in hybridization. One is 3D orbital involvement, that is called D2sp3, where D2 indicates, D2 is written in the left side. That means 3D orbital is involved. And if 4D orbital is involved, this is written as sp3d2. So the difference is same. Hybridization is same, of course, and shape is also same octahedral. But the only difference is we can have 3D orbitals if 3D orbitals are available. If we have two d orbitals, empty d orbitals, then we take d2sp3. That is 3 orbitals are involving in the hybridization, in bond formation. That is called d2sp3. If 3D orbitals are not available, then if it is filled, then we need to but d orbitals are required from 4D, so we have to go for 4D. That's why we use 4D orbital. It is written as sp3d2. So if you write d2 on the right side, it indicates 4D orbital is involved. If you write d on the left side, it indicates 3D orbitals are involved. So that is a major point what you need to understand. And both are same in shape, octahedral shape. But this left side, if that is 3D orbitals are involved, then we call it as inner orbital complex. The terminology is little bit different. When 3D orbital is involved in octahedral complex formation, it is called inner orbital complex. The hybridization is D2sp3. Okay. If 4D orbitals are involved in hybridization, then it is called outer orbital complex. So here you have to be very very careful that 4D orbital is involving called outer orbital complex. The hybridization is written as sp3d2. This is how we need to understand sp3d2. And good examples we have here. For inner orbital complex, we are having hexa aqua titanium, hexacyano iron. Here it is ferrate, hexacyano ferrate. This is also hexaamine cobalt, like that. Similarly, hexafluoro ferrate, hexafluoro cobaltate, hexa aqua ferrate. Sorry, iron. Here it is not minus; it's positive iron. So depending on the ligand, nature of the ligand, outer orbitals and inner orbitals are decided. So this inner orbital complex called IOC. Similarly, outer orbital complex OOC. Here, the last one. So these two are decided by the nature of the light. So this is very very important. How and which will determine whether it is D2sp3 or sp3dt. Already we know that if 3D orbitals are available, it will go for D2sp3. But if 3D orbitals are not available, it will go for 4D. Then who will decide whether 3D orbitals are available or not? So that decided by the nature of the ligand. In sometimes, not always, but in sometimes. Sometimes it is not possible. Even the nature will not decide. For example, if you take zinc-like complex, then it will not be possible to have any 3D available because already completely filled. So it will not allow it in it. 3D orbital is not possible. So this already we know. Yeah. So this is the main point what we have to understand that what we mean by inner and outer orbital complex. If this is specifically used for octahedral complexes, of course you can use this for even tetrahedral, but it doesn't mean any value because of their 4D orbital do not involve at all. But here d orbitals are either possible from 3D. You look at this structure. So 3D possibility, 4D possibility. If 3D orbitals are involved, this is called D2sp3. It is called inner orbital complex. This is one more word, low spin complex. The another word for this is low spin complex, or another word for this is spin paired complex. Whereas for outer d orbital, that is where 4D is involving, outer orbital complex, this is called high spin complex, and also it is called spin free complex, and the hybridization is sp3d2. Why this another naming is there? What is this low spin, high spin, spin paired, spin free? So this is the point is simple. Low spin means spinning of electron is considered based on the number of unpaired electrons, single electrons. Unpaired means single. So if single electron is present, then it has some spin value. If two electrons are paired up, then when electrons are paired up, the two spin values get cancelled. The spinning of one electron is equivalent opposite to the spin of the other electron. Therefore, both one spins in clockwise, another spins in anti-clockwise. Therefore, the net spin value is zero. For electron pair, pair means two electrons if present in the same orbital, the net spin is zero. If the electron is single in the orbital, then the net spin value is plus 1 by 2. Spin quantum number we know, last spin quantum number is plus 1 by 2. So, whenever we have single electrons available, that is called high spin. Single electrons are available, high spin. You see here, for 4D orbital, that is sp3d2, it is called high spin. Why? Because in the 3D, there is a possibility of having single electrons. If single electrons are available in the 3D and we are not forcing them to pair up, therefore we are using 4D. Therefore, what happens? Single electrons are freely available in 3D. That's why it gives high spin. The total spin value becomes high. That's why it is called high spin if 4D orbital is involved. Whereas if we are forcing the single electrons to pair up, so that whatever single electrons are available, we are forcing them to pair up, and so that we vacate 3D orbitals, so that we are using for hybridization. Therefore, what happens? The spin value is decreased. No single electron is available. Therefore, the spin value is decreased. That's why it is called low spin complex. So that is the main reason why the terminology low spin and high spin complexes has evolved. So n minus 1 d orbitals involvement is 3D and n d orbital involvement is 4D. That is the difference between inner orbital complex and outer orbital complex, and also the difference between D2sp3 and sp3d2 hybridization. And another most important feature what we have to understand about valence bond theory is uh, nature of the life. This is one major concept and major information we look at. Strong and weak ligands. What we mean by strong and weak ligand? Strong ligand is any ligand which is forcing, which is capable of forcing the electrons to pair up. Okay, if there are possibilities of single electrons, then these strong ligands they force the single electrons to pair up. So that is what is called as strong field ligands. Strong field ligands. For example, cyanide and carbonyl, ethylene diamine, EN. EN is ethylene diamine. EN, the name already we have discussed this in the last session. So this is cyanide, this is carbonyl, CO, this is ethylene diamine, short form, and this is ammonium, it's amine, what we use the terminology. Amine sometimes strong, but sometimes behaves as weak, depending on the nature. Of course, that is not explained in valence bond theory. Why some of ligands are strong? Why they are strong? There is no explanation available in valence bond theory. And there are some ligands which are called weak field ligands. Why they are weak field ligands means even if single electrons are present, these ligands do not force them to pair. So they cannot what force. They are not capable of making the electrons pair. That means if these weak ligands are present, electrons remain as such. If single electron is there, even if 5 single electrons are present in the 3D, then they remain as 5 only. They don't pair up because the ligand is weak. So these weak ligands are all halides: I minus, Br minus, chloro, bromo, iodo, fluoro. Similarly, nitrato, nitro, not nitrito, hydroxo, aqua. H2O neutral ligand, that is the neutral ligand, which is also weak in nature. So we can simply understand that strong field ligands force all electrons, single electrons if available, they force all single electrons to pair. They are called strong field ligands. Weak field ligands means these ligands do not force electrons to pair up. Pairing of the electrons already you know. So that means wherever they are present, they go and shift to the other single electron. That means two electrons are filled in the orbital. So that is what the effect of strong field effect and weak field effect of the ligand. But what we need to understand at this point that valency bond theory cannot explain why this nature is. For some ligands, why they are behaving like strong field ligands, that is not explained. The reasons are not explained. Similarly, why some ligands behaving as weak field ligands, isn't it? So at this level, we need to understand this point, and this is clarified in crystal field theory, which comes in the next session, but not here. So here we simply understand that strong field ligands, whenever present, then we look at the single electrons and force them to pair first. And wherever weak field ligands are present, then don't make any what rearrangement of electrons. Electrons, whatever is present, they remain as such. In the central metal, we are all talking all this in the central metal ion. So when ligands are approaching to the central metal ion, this type of what pairing or non-pairing is taking place in the central metal ion d orbital. So that is where. And one more important feature, what we understand by using valence bond theory is magnetic moment. This magnetic moment measurement is based on the important factor, that is unpaired electrons, number of single electrons. Already we had a discussion that number of single electrons can be calculated. When you look at hybridization and d orbital configuration, s orbital configuration, and p orbital configuration. After looking at the three orbital configurations, we start working on counting number of unpaired electrons. And this number of unpaired electrons or single electrons is always decided by the Ligand nature. Already we just now we discussed that strong field ligands, weak field ligands. If weak field ligands are present, then there is a possibility of having more number of single electrons. We have single electrons more in number. But if strong field ligand is present, then what happens? Single electrons are paired. Therefore, we find less number of single electrons. So this number of unpaired electrons is calculated based on the nature of the ligand, and after writing the orbital diagrams, we have to write orbital diagram for 3D, 4s and 4p, and look at that electrons distribution of the central metal ion. Whatever the total number of electrons are present in the central metal ion, we have to distribute them. After that, we check the what nature of the ligand. After that, whether it is to be paired or not. After that, we have to count how many single electrons are present. They are called unpaired electrons. And once you calculate the unpaired electrons, that is taken as n. N is the unpaired electrons. So once we get unpaired electrons, this n value, then we can calculate magnetic moment. So to calculate magnetic moment mu, we need to know number of single electrons. That is necessary. Without that number, you cannot calculate magnetic moment. Now, once you get number of single electrons, that n value, then the formula is magnetic moment mu s. Why this s? This mu s indicates spin only magnetic moment, because magnetism generally comes here. Why we need to consider only unpaired electrons? Why not paired electrons? That may be a big question. So here you need to understand very important point, that how magnetism is developed. Magnetism is a property which is developed due to the spinning of any charged particle. Magnetism is developed due to the spinning of any charged particle. Electron is a negatively charged particle. So during the spin, because every electron is in spin motion, we know that. So electron spin. So this spinning electron develops magnetic moment. Therefore, every electron is a bar magnet. Every electron is a bar magnet without any doubt. Now, whatever the magnetic moment is developed, it has some direction. That magnetic moment is that magnetism is a vector quantity. It has direction, and its direction depends on the spinning direction. If the electron is spinning in clockwise direction, the magnetism is upward direction. But when we have two electrons which are paired up in an orbital, if we have two electrons which are paired up, then what happens? They have opposite spins. One is more spinning in clockwise, another is spinning in anti-clockwise. Then what happens? One develops magnetic moment in upward direction, the other electron develops magnetic moment in downward direction. So what happens? Both are equal in quantity but opposite in direction. So the net magnetic value or magnetic moment value of paired electrons is zero. That's why wherever electron pair is present, you need not check any magnetic moment value, because the total value is zero. That's why we need to take only spin only magnetic moment with the formula of under root n into n plus 2, where n indicates number of single electrons. So that number of single electrons will give you the magnetic moment value. And here we are considering only electron spinning for calculating magnetic moment. That's why we write mu s. Here this mu s is indicating magnetic moment calculated from spin only. Means, is there any other what parameter to calculate magnetic moment? Yes, we have other parameter which we not covering at this moment, but orbital motion, orbital spinning is also taken into consideration when we look at the F black elements. There we in the F black elements we discussed this, that orbital motion J value is also considered along with the spin value. So spinning of orbital, spinning of electron, both are responsible for magnetic moment. But here in this case, we are considering only spin of the electrons, not the orbital motion. Here, for example, if we have unpaired electrons, one unpaired electron, then substitute here. Mu value becomes 1 into 1 plus 2, that is 3. Root 3 is 1.73. The units for this Bohr magnetons, BM, Bohr magnetons. BM is a Bohr magneton. Similarly, if you have some 3 value, then Mus value 3.87 something, Bohr magnetons. If n is equal to 0, for example, n is equal to 0, then what happens? Mu value becomes 0 into whatever it is, 0. So magnetic moment becomes 0. So here we need to decide based on the magnetic moment whether the given complex is diamagnetic or paramagnetic. If the magnetic moment value is 0, then it is called diamagnetic. If the magnetic moment value is not 0, whatever it is, even it may be the minimum value is 1.73 because n is the 1 is the minimum value. So once n is equal to 1, the minimum value is 1.73. So it starts from 1.73 to it may go to any number, maximum possible number. So in all that cases, the complex is called paramagnetic. So simply in this point, what we need to understand, three major issues we are developing by using this valence bond theory, that number of unpaired electrons is to be decided. Once we decide number of unpaired electrons, if it is not having any unpaired electron, that means its magnetic moment is 0, or in other words, it is diamagnetic in nature. That is one important conclusion. And the second important conclusion is, if it has any number of unpaired electrons, then take that number and substitute in the formula, and we get magnetic moment value. And also we know that it is paramagnetic in nature. So this is how we need to decide the magnetic property of the complex based on the theoretical calculation. But we also understand at this point that we can calculate magnetic moment even by experimental method. So the important point is, experimental method value is always correct because that is anyhow by experiment. That is a true value. Whereas theoretical value should be equal to experimental value. Then only our theory is correct, isn't it? So there is always they have taken this calculation, and almost to the maximum extent the values are coinciding. So this theory and this formula is correct. So that is a major point what we have to understand. And even in some cases, whether we have how many number of unpaired electrons is confusing sometimes, because which ligand is strong, which ligand is weak, we don't know. So in such confusion state, whenever we have, then on theoretical basis we don't know, but practically we check the magnetic moment of the complex by experiment, and based on the magnetic moment value, we can easily check number of unpaired electrons, isn't it? So if the value is suppose 3.87 Bohr magnetons, that clearly indicates that the complex has 3 unpaired electrons. So that is a clear indication. So based on that unpaired electrons number, we can check whether electron pairing is possible or not. So based on that, we can decide that ligand is strong or weak. So like that, we can understand. This is two-way understanding the things. We can go through theoretical values, or we can take the help of experimental values. Then we decide what is the nature of the ligand and what is the number of unpaired electrons also. So this is very important development in understanding the nature of the complex by using this important property called magnetic moment. And what is the total information that we are going to get from using valence bond theory, or let us just take the nutshell of understanding valence bond theory. So number one, first of all, we are going to get the hybridization. How hybridization? Hybridization is decided by coordination number, isn't it? Because if you look at the coordination number, if it is 2, then we decide the hybridization is sp. If the coordination number is 3, we decide the hybridization as sp2. If the coordination number is 6, we decide the hybridization as d2sp3 or sp3d2. So that hybridization is decided. And once hybridization is decided, then what happens? We get the geometry. That is the shape of the complex is decided. That is also very important information from valence band theory. And after that, we also take the what orbital diagram, 3D, 4s, 4p orbital diagram. Based on that, we calculate the number of unpaired electrons. Again, here already we just now discussed it. Based on the nature of the ligand, we decide what is the number of unpaired electrons. And once we get the number of unpaired electrons n value, then we can calculate magnetic moment of the complex theoretically and also by using experimental methods. And if we are unable to explain theoretically, we take the help of experimental methods, and that value is deciding how many number of unpaired electrons are there. And once unpaired electrons are decided, then we can also decide the hybridization, because this is all theoretical values, but we can take the experimental help. And based on the hybridization of octahedral complex, specifically whether it is D2sp3 or sp3d2, we can decide whether it is inner orbital complex or outer orbital complex. And once it is inner orbital complex or outer orbital complex, then we can decide, we can conclude that the given ligand is strong field ligand or weak field ligand. So these are all the major features of valency bond theory, and how to understand valency bond theory, and what are the major points of valency bond theory, and what are the major conclusions on the information what we can get by using valency bond theory. So this is all about the valency bond theory. And at this level, we stop our lecture. In the next session, we start taking up different examples to understand valence band theory, how it would what make us to know how we get that information of hybridization geometry and unpaired electrons, magnetic movement, whether it is inner orbital complex or outer orbital complex, and also strong field ligand or weak field ligand. Anyhow, we have already decided that the strong field ligands are the examples we have taken, and also weak field ligands we have taken the examples. So based on that point, we take up the theory, and the experimental values also we check, so that whatever the theoretical values we are getting, that should be compulsorily coincide with the experimental values. Then only our theory is correct. So the most important theoretical value and experimental value where we can check is magnetic moment. So that is one important aspect of valence bond theory. Okay. At this level, we stop our lecture.